Hello, awesome students. It's Dr. Foltz. Today we're going to go over The Wife Story by Ursula K. So let's just take a look at it. The Wife Story was written, as I said, by Ursula K. It was published in 1982, and it is considered one of her best-known stories. And one of the reasons why it's one of the best-known stories is probably because of the surprise ending, because of the twist ending that it has. Now, I'm going to ruin the story for you. So if you haven't read it yet, read it. If not, I'm going to spoil it right now. All right, that's your warning. So first of all, it's narrated by the wife, and it's specifically narrated within the vernacular first person. And when we say vernacular and when we say first person, it's being told by one person, their point of view. I think we know that one. But vernacular is a little bit more complex. Vernacular deals with word choice, deals with pronunciation, and specifically that's word choice, and the pronunciation is usually tethered to a specific region. In this case here, it's a Southern vernacular, a Southern dialect that the wife uses, and with some specific, I suppose, pronunciations, you could say, but more specifically about some word choices or phraseology that have their roots within the South. And the reason for this, the reason why Ursula K. does this, is because it makes the character more human, which comes back to our surprise ending, which is she's not human, she is a wolf. And the husband also is a wolf, although not in the sense that you would expect when I say wolf. She's a wolf. He's a wolf, rather, in the sense where he's more like a werewolf, except for the opposite, because he begins the story as a wolf and then he transforms into a human being. So maybe not a wolf, maybe a were-person instead. I don't know. So let's continue on with actually what happens. Now, as I mentioned, it's narrated by the wife. And even though it's narrated by the wife, its real focus is on the husband, her relationship with the husband, and how what seemed to have been a perfect relationship sort of decays and deteriorates into bloodshed. So, like I said, focus on the husband. And we first learned about the husband, about how he's a good husband, or was a good husband, like I said, past tense, and he was a good father. There wasn't any bad in him, and he clearly loved his children by the description that was given about him. Now, that's important because we expect then, as a reader, that the husband's going to transform from a good husband, a good father who had no bad in him, into really a bad husband, bad father who had lots of bad, or maybe even evil within him, and maybe didn't treat the children correctly. But that's not going to happen for a while. But with that said, she does give a hint, that is to say, the narrator does give a hint that something happened which ruined everything. So what happened? Well, we're not told yet within the story. Instead, we're given a little bit of background on how the two met. Well, they had met specifically when the husband was coming back from hunting. And whether he just had a bad day of hunting or just wasn't a good hunter at all, it doesn't make much difference. All we know is that he didn't catch so much as a field mouse. However, he was really, really positive, even though he didn't catch anything. And that was a quality that the wife tells us, the reader, that she really, really admired and she really loved about him. And eventually this relationship sort of blossoms, so much so that she brings the husband home. They're not the husband and wife yet. I'm just going to call him husband and wife, though. But she brings him home to the sister whom she lives with. The sister immediately recognizes that they have a really good relationship. And the sister moves out. The husband and wife move in together. And then eventually, I suppose, they become husband and wife. And during that time frame, the wife describes this as the happiest year of her life. And she goes on to tell us more good qualities about the husband, so much so that she's basically bragging about him, which is perfectly fine. She says that he's a hard worker, that he's good, he's big rather, and fine looking. There's that sort of Southern dialect that's going on, colloquial language that's going on there. She talks about how everyone looked up to him rather, and then also talks about his beautiful singing voice that even today, even after all these bad things happened, brings shivers to her. So we know that there was a really strong relationship there. And she says, sadly, at the end of this lengthy description, that she'll never know joy like that again. So again, what has happened? Why did they what happened to their relationship? Well, we're given a hint. And the hint is the moon was at fault. And the hint is that was in his father's blood. And the hint is that there was a curse in his blood. Now, let's take a step back here. We don't have any evidence as to what happened, but when we hear moon, we hear blood and hear curse, and we know Ursula K., who sort of leans in the sci-fi fantastical department as a writer, it's not unreasonable to think that the husband is a werewolf. But it's likely you didn't think that the husband started out as a wolf. You're probably thinking human being, then turning into a wolf. But we're still not quite sure there. Still, there's more evidence that suggests that, yeah, maybe we're going to follow that archetype, that trope of the werewolf. Because when everything took place, after all of the violence that takes place, which you haven't learned about yet, the villagers say that was the change in the moon that does it. And then the villagers talk to her about the dark. Something always happened in the dark of the moon. So again, we're beating down this concept of the werewolf, this concept of this fantastical monster, and what happens in the dark and what happens in the moon here. But what the wife does, she does supply for us some more specific evidence about conflicts that's taking place. Now, the conflicts that's taking place between the wife and the husband, we don't really have any evidence that they're fighting verbally, and certainly nothing that implies domestic violence either. All we know is that he's getting up in the morning or he's getting up in the middle of the night to go hunting. And that's happened a few times. And when he comes back from hunting, he's always worn out. He's angry. Now, on top of that, he's not just angry and worn out. And his behavior, which is relatively new within the relationship, bothers her, of course. But what happens is when he comes back angry and worn out, he's also smelling strange. And when the wife complains, or at least notices about this, or notes this to the husband, he denies it, of course. But yet, he sort of sneaks away like into the corner, so to speak, and he washes himself repeatedly. And the smell doesn't come out of him for days and days and days. And so now we're thinking to ourselves, well, maybe it's not this werewolf thing. Maybe it's another carnal aspect of the husband, and that would be he's having some sort of relationship outside of marriage because he's out in the middle of the night hunting. He's done this 3 or 4 times. It's a strange new behavior. He's smelling funny, maybe smelling like another woman. At least we're led to believe these concepts here. So there's trouble in paradise here. But of course, we know that this is not the case. Another conflict that takes place is that the husband is scaring the children. Now, it doesn't say the husband's doing anything specific. Again, back to this idea of physical violence, domestic violence. There's no hint to imply any physical violence taking place, but the children are afraid. And one of them is yelling, "Go away, go, make it go away, make it go away," again and again and again. And the wife, who also is afraid of the husband at this moment here, who's also becoming a little bit uncomfortable with the husband, she also feels this way, but yet she scolds the child because she doesn't think it's the right thing. But like I said, then she admits later on, she felt the same way as the kid does. So there's definitely a discomfort in the house beyond just he's going out in the middle of the night 3 or 4 times, since they've become married here. And that's, of course, when we immediately transition into the transformation that takes place. So what's the transformation? Well, what happens is the wife wakes up in the middle of the night. She hears something. She goes to the doorway area, and she sees her husband transforming. And we think to ourselves, aha, he's transforming into a werewolf. That's the moon thing. That's the blood thing. That's the curse thing. And we start to see the transformation. But what we see is radically different than what we expect. Sure, his feet get longer, and that's perfectly fine. But then what happens, the hair on his body, it comes all away. So that's kind of the opposite of what I think about a werewolf. I think about a werewolf being really hairy, but this, of course, is not a werewolf, right? And the skin's also described as being a worm skin, right? And the reason why is because it's hairless and it's white here. And then it's not only does his body physically change, but his face changes too. In fact, his face becomes flatter, which again is sort of the opposite of what we're expecting, because when we think if you're going to transform into a wolf, then maybe your face would lengthen out into like a snout, if you will, the way a canine's would, but instead it becomes flatter and the mouth becomes wide. And here's a key thing too. The teeth become flat and dull, and they're grinning there. And so again, the opposite of what we expect. Wolf would have sharp teeth. Anything but flat and dull. And then the eyes also, they become blue, and they have white rims around them. And that's important because later on we're going to hear about the description about the sister's eyes, who are yellow. So again, they're opposite of what we're expecting. And then here's the kicker. Ursula Guin, through the narrator, describes the husband as standing up on two legs. Now, if I stood up on two legs, that's not a big deal because I walk on two legs all the time. But the wolves being on all four, him standing up on two legs, that's the difference. So clearly he's transforming into a human being here. But we don't have any evidence that they're wolves yet until Ursula Guin presents us with the narrator or the wife's response to this. And what's her response? Well, she becomes both terrified and angry. And the evidence to support this idea that she is actually a wolf is that she has a growl that bursts out into a crazy, awful howling. And then that anger is described as being a mother's anger, which is fine. But during that mother's anger, she's snarling. So again, snarling, howling, growling, those are all sounds that a wolf makes, not a human being makes, at least not a human being in his or her or their right mind. And then just in case you missed the fact that the husband is transforming into a man as opposed to some other monster, Ursula Guin literally calls him a man thing that has no gun. And now finally he physically does attack the wife. Before, there's nothing that's really implied, but now we have evidence that there is a physical attack that's taking place. He takes a tree branch and he swings it at her. He attacks her in one way or another. And here's more evidence that she's actually a wolf. She snaps the tree branch in her teeth. So again, I don't see myself snapping any tree branches in my teeth, even a thin one, but a wolf, I can see that thing. So remember when she started howling? Well, the howling calls her sister and the rest of the pack. And look at the description of the sister. She's got a mane that's high. So, again, wolf thing. So that's it's riled up there. It's standing, the hair is standing up there. And then she has yellow eyes. Remember how the husband was described as having blue eyes with white rims around it. And then last but not least, he's described, once he sees them coming, he takes off on how many legs again? On two legs. So the reason, again, why Ursula Guin, or really the narrator saying on two legs, is because it's something you don't see all the time. You're not seeing a wolf or a dog running on two legs. So there's this juxtaposition between how she's used to seeing individuals walk, which are on all fours, versus what the husband or the man thing now is doing. And so what happens? Well, the sisters and the others, they follow the husband or the so-called man thing. They pull him down. It's described as an it. And the sister gets her teeth right on his throat, which, of course, kills him. And there's blood all over. He's going to be described as being bloody later on. But there's blood all over her mouth. And what does she do? Again, more evidence to reinforce that they're wolves. She wipes the blood off with her forelegs. Now, if I'm going to wipe blood off with my arms, I'm going to call them arms or forearms as opposed to four legs. Four legs meaning the front legs of a dog, of a wolf here. And then last but not least, we have sort of a final reflection by the wife of what happened. She's saddened, of course. She wishes that he would transform back to his true form, but he does not. Instead, he's what's it say? He's a dead man who's laying there white and bloody. Right, so he's a man. He's not a wolf. And the rest of the pack, as well as the wife and the sister, after all is said and done, they head back to the woods, into the blessed dark. So she can't see these things anymore. It's a distant memory. It's where they live. So that is our summary of the wife's story. I hope this was helpful to you. As always, like the video and subscribe, please. Helps out with a lot of things. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you next time. Bye now.